Hello, everybody. And today we're back with Ahmad.
Ahmad.
Ah,
You'll get it one day.
one day. I should prepare these things.
Yeah, we'll have a practice session before the session. That'll work out.
but at least we have a good intro. I'll
Yeah, yeah,
skip the whole intro and let you introduce your subject and talk
sure,
about
sure. Thank you, Emmanuel, for having me once again. Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, or whatever it is time you're watching this. So I want to talk about agape today. Agape, I think, is becoming more and more of a very, very important theme in my life. Being someone who struggles also with, I don't want to call it depression. I've not been officially diagnosed, but I struggle with depression-like symptoms, feeling worthlessness, and I struggle with a lot of self-hate, a lot of feelings that I'm not worthy enough. Oh no, people don't like you, blah blah blah, or that shit's becoming very very normal for me. But I've recognized how much agape is helpful in dealing both with a sense of feeling like life is worthless, not worth living, and in the sense of dealing with my own problems of self worth. And I think I'm going to define it by tackling these two issues. And then I'm going to make like a sum up definition. So, in the first case, when it comes to feeling like life is this mountain, this why do I have to do this? It doesn't feel good. It's too boring. It's not stimulating enough. Consistently I found the attitude of saying, okay, don't do it because it feels good, but do it because it is good. And then I take up, for example, something like playing the piano. And even though I'm not interested in playing the piece, when I go through the piece and play the piece, I find at some point that when I drop this desire to feel good, when I drop this desire to be stimulated by the piece, I suddenly enjoy the process of giving the piece what it needs to be beautiful. So I'm playing the piece and I remember, for example, that I need to play this note harder or this note a bit lighter. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling joy again. And then the pleasure comes back and I'm able to digest life again, so to speak. But when it comes to, for example, other people, a sense of worthlessness from other because I feel not good enough for other people or because I feel like other people are judging me, it affects me a lot. For example, if I say hello to a person and they don't smile back, it affects me a lot when I read something in scripture and I recognize that I don't live up to it. I also feel like, okay, I'm such a terrible person. I'm so useless. I'm so worthless. But again, comes this attitude that, all right, you are not functioning like you're supposed to, but I'm going to ask you only one question. What do you need to be good? So, to sum it up with a metaphor, if you have a broken TV, you don't call it a bad TV. You can call it a bad TV because it's not fulfilling its function. That's the justice part. But if you want to do the loving kindness part, the agapic part, you ask yourself, okay, this TV is not functioning as it should. What does it need to be a good TV? It's not a judgmental attitude. It's more of an attitude of questioning what this needs to be given for its own good.
it.
And that's what agape is for me. It's to look at something, no matter how slimy, no matter how ugly, no matter how frustrating and off-putting it is, and ask yourself, what does this need to be good with the hope that it can transform? This is how Jesus deals with Mary Magdalene. And I don't want to claim to know scripture, but this is my own personal interpretation that she was about to be stoned. She was being judged by everybody. And Jesus comes up and says, okay, who are you guys to judge her? You're not better than her. Then it's an instance of agape when he looks at her as a whore and he takes her by the hand and then she becomes his disciple. It's a bit like the Pygmalion effect right there. By acknowledging her personhood, her worth as a servant of God, a child of God, or whatever you want to call it, he was able to he enabled her to transform into Mary Magdalene, the disciple. So this is agape, and it's a very, very important theme in my life nowadays, because it is. So I would also place it as, since as human beings we're always caught up in our narratives, right? We're always having these stories in our heads, and we're always stuck in these stories, because when you try to get out of the story, you're just making up another story. So it's like you get even more stuck. But when it comes to agape, take a very typical story of I'm not good enough. Agape says, okay, let's say you're not good enough. What do you need to be good? So it takes the story and it opens it up. It transforms it into a moment of character building, to a moment of love, so that your agency is restored in your role. So this is agape for me.
Mm-hmm. So I identify a pattern that I've been looking at, and it's you and well, yourself, but also the things that you relate to, right? Your personal relationships, you and others, and then you and God, right? And these three realms, they require a different attentiveness, because you could say the you and the world around you is you subject, right? You're a subject, object relationship, right? You're relating to something that lacks personhood. But you're still subjected to it in some sense, right? And then it's like, how do you let yourself be informed by that? And then you have person-person relationship, and hopefully the person that you relate to has personhood. So there's a quality there that introduces a dance, right? Like it introduces a dynamic relationship. And then you have the frame of God, and like God is like everything, everywhere, all at once in some sense, right? It's like it's history, it's yourself and others, but also like that which allows you to have relationships and like all of these things. And so there's an acceptation from these domains that can go to other domains, right? So
Yes.
improve
Yes.
the
Yes.
quality of relationship.
Yes.
That's the first thing that I noticed. Now, the second part is you have a judgment, and then you have the conviction, right? So this is the is-ought gap, right? Like, so the judgment is like, this is how it is, right? So, for example, you're lacking, right? So now there's a standard by which you're compared.
Yeah.
And then you can be punished, or you can be shown mercy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so you can be approached with mercy, where the redemptive quality, or there's an assumption of redemption in the mercy. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes. Yes.
I'm not going to put my foot down because I know that you feel guilty, and you're going to better yourself in the future. Now, there's also, and I wouldn't call this necessarily judgment, right? But there's like I see you sitting there, and there's a sense of incompleteness, right? So the incompleteness is not necessarily a lack on your side, right? Like it's not a condemnation or a conviction, or like I'm not judging you. I'm looking up what could be,
Yes.
and try and manifest that, right? And
Yes.
when I look at agape, I think it's more in that dimension. Like I think the judgment and mercy are also necessary, right?
Yeah.
But they don't point up, right? Like there's they cut the going down off in some sense. It is like don't keep going that way. like don't you're digging a hole. Stop digging, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
While the agape is in hope, right? It's like
Yes.
there's something to go towards.
Yes.
Now my camera. Okay, good. I was hoping that would fix itself.
Yeah.
And so I think that maps back to what you were saying at the start, right? So life is a mountain, blah blah blah, right? Like
Yeah.
what is a mountain? Well, a mountain is there's an expectation, and I'm not living up to the expectation,
Yes.
and I'm being judged for that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's the mountain, and what's playing the piece and giving the piece what it needs. Well, that's not a mountain, right? Like that's trying to identify what could be and trying to be a part of that.
Yes.
So you see the same two directionals, right? Like one is looking up and the other one is looking down. And now to connect it to my personal experiences lately, my depression gets me caught up in a spirit. And the spirit is not necessarily true, right? Like that's the big question, whether it's true or not. But it's like I cannot see myself enacting the good thing, right? And from that there's a fatalism, like I will accept my fate and I won't even try, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And like, why is this true? Well, like I am certainly bound to physical limitations, but it's also because I cannot see out of the spirit, right? Like just like you were saying, like if I sit at the piano and I'm not trying to give the piece what I want and what it needs. I mean, there's a entrapment there, and so like I realized that I have in some sense really good capacity to discern certain things, but I don't have a good capacity to relate to. Yeah, it's like the water I swim in. It's not even the frame that I'm in, right? Because I could identify the frame, but it's what gives rise to the frame.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the spirit that pushes me into looking at the world in a certain way, right? And like if I wouldn't be in there, like if I would be captured in a good spirit, then things flow for me, right? And so to relate that back to what you're saying, right? Like when I'm with people and I can either serve them or share in their spirit, I usually get lifted up out of this. Right? But for some reason I cannot be my own reference there.
Savior. You cannot be the person who lifts yourself out of the quicksand.
Right.
Would you describe it like quicksand? Like you're swimming in a very viscous fluid when you're in that spirit.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I at some level I've given up, right? Because like 10 years of depression is just like you can't, like, that struggle is too much.
It's a very, very deep struggle because you keep on trying to wrestle with your own shadow, and it's almost like you always get caught up in this. It always closes, it always makes your back bend lower, and then the only way out is just like the case with the piano. Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, when you were talking about back, like I was like, okay, so when I was depressed, I was walking outside. I was walking like this, huddled. I couldn't,
Yeah.
like, I was literally trying to get my head to look up, and like within 5 seconds it would be down again.
It will be a holiday. You mentioned this before. Yeah, it's like it's a subconscious. It's like something in you is just always sneaking under your nose
Well,
and just
it's the
shrinking.
lobsters, right? Like the defeated lobster.
Lobsters. Really?
Jordan Peterson talks about this, right? Like the lobsters
I
when
didn't know that. Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, like when they're in the hierarchy, right? Like there's a submissive. Like when you're
Okay.
defeated, there's a and like when you're the winner, you're like, come at me, right? Like come
Yeah.
at me, world.
Yeah.
And like people say, right? Like put a smile on your face, shoulders back, right? Like
Yes.
face the like that posture actually does stuff to your nervous
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, so I got like a bunch of stuff with yoga, right? Like getting back into bodily relationship.
Yeah.
Like now, I wake up and then I have like 2 hours or 3 hours where I'm like half in dream world in bed,
Yeah.
and it's like my spine is just like hooting and
Yeah.
like it's having all of these things and it's bringing things up in my mind, and I'm literally processing
Yeah.
my relationship to my spine, like
Okay.
I'm reconfiguring the way that
Yeah.
I'm relating to my nervous connection.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like that is like a really intense process, and I think there's a bunch of things broken in me that like I need to rewire literally, right?
Yeah.
but but yeah, like when you said like it's in your spine, like it's like yes, and that's like a physical fight that I am engaged in right literally now.
Oh
So
my
yeah.
God. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of effort. It's part of the mountain, this lifting back yourself back up. Honestly, even for me, it just sitting with my back straight on a table, it sometimes feels like a marathon. Like yesterday
Mhm.
when I finished running, I couldn't wait to just get in bed and curl up like this. It
Mhm.
was like it's effort to keep yourself up straight like this. I totally relate the energy that goes into doing that.
Yeah, but sometimes it feels natural, right? Like
Hmm.
sometimes like standing straight, it's like, and then the huddle part feel,
Yeah.
and so, like that's what you need to do, right? That you need to reconfigure, like, and that's like why the world is attention, and it's like, okay, like how much effort did it take me to even realize things that I could attend to, right?
Yes. Yes.
and 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 then it's like it's like this onion, right? Like it's always unfolding, and there's always
Yes.
an extra
Absolutely.
layer. It's like, oh, I fixed
Absolutely.
this, and then
Goes
it's
on
like,
to infinity. It goes on to but that's why the perspective thing is important, because it only goes to infinity when you're still stuck in it. But when you're out of it, it's the
mm,
onion. It's no longer the layers, right? And the thing is, so let's take this for example as the example, lifting your back up. There is a configuration of attention where you notice the spirit that is bringing your back down. So when you're lifting your back up after it's being brought down, you're just forcing. Like there is something in you that has this momentum. It's like I'm not good enough. I'm low in the hierarchy. Just lift your back down, and of course it helps to lift it back up so that you're not caught up in it, so that you can catch a good spirit. It works. The thing is, this resistance sometimes, in my own phenomenology, it stirs up the negative spirit and makes it fight back.
mm-hmm. Can
And yeah, and this is, I think, where agape can be helpful. Not in the sense of accepting it forever, but in the sense of looking at it and understanding what is there. Like, what is going on right now? So there's a judgment, something happened. Where did this come from? What is the point of contact? Because obviously, this, there was a process before it. And
mm-hmm.
lifting up without understanding the process is like pulling the brakes too fast on the car. You need to decelerate first, you know?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
so there's a, yeah, I don't know if I like the break analogy, but
No,
I
it's all
like the
good, but yeah.
abruptness in there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
um
Abruptness. Yeah.
but So like what you do is you identify against, right? Because like what you do when you straighten your back is like you're dealing with a symptom, right? You're not dealing with the disease.
Exactly.
Like, but I don't know if you want to deal with the disease, right? Because like what I do when I lay in bed, and like I can only do it when I'm there, because I don't think I can do it when I'm not in that mental space.
Yeah.
And like
know
I
that.
can't get myself there just
I know that. Yeah.
just with being on the edge of sleep, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
there's a way in which my will takes control, right? And I think that's what you talk about with the breaks, right? It's like, and I have experienced this with meditation a lot, right? So you feel pressure in a direction,
Yes.
and then you push back, and like what happens is you get this movement, and you
yeah. Exactly. It snaps back. Exactly. Absolutely. It's like a rubber wall.
And then you're like, okay, like let's move slowly, right? Right, that's slowly, and it's like you realize that you don't have any control over the moderation in the impulse back, and
exactly.
and then the cure is worse than the disease, right? Because like at that point, like that's where you get tension in your muscles or something, right? Like you're like, I'm trying to keep my shoulders back. and then you're laying in bed like you, right? Like after the run, you're like, oh my god, like let me get back into this.
Oh my god. That's perfect. Just so perfectly described. I'm feeling a lot of joy at how much I relate to this. It's just exactly. Oh man, exactly. Yes.
But like I've realized that relationship on many different levels in my experience.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, like what's the solution? Well, the solution is obviously not trying to outsmart whatever is happening.
Okay, you're wiser than me in this case. I see what you mean, why you don't want to deal with the disease now. I understand.
I'm like, that's giving it up to go, right?
Okay.
Like that's the surrender. Like you're like, okay, when I take authority, I'm gonna mess it up, right? Just like if I'm gonna be president of my country right now, I'm not gonna do a better job than the current president, even though I have better ideas or whatever. Like I cannot take that space because I don't have sense making that is appropriate for that space. And so I like, in order to get there, and this is what the Romans did really well, right? They went up through ranks through the army, right? So what they had is they had a holistic vision of every segment of participation. And then when you're a general, you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, when you get a general that comes out of university, they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they're going to make this awesome plan, which is theoretically insanely good, which cannot be implemented at all. And that's what you are. Like that's what we are. We're Muppets, right? Like we think like, oh, we can do this. Like, I'm here to tell you.
So you are not qualified to be a general in your own mind and body, and you would need to go up in ranks. And I suppose the most fit person to be a general over your body is for you as a Christian, Jesus Christ.
Right.
That's what it means.
Like he's the king, right? Like, and he's the savior, right? Like, so if you're following in his footsteps, right? Like in his will,
yes,
you will become the vessel that can properly express.
So yes, you're so you know IFS, right?
You what?
IFS. You know IFS?
Internal family systems. Yes. Demon summoning. Yes.
I knew you'd say that. I knew you'd say that. So
My mom likes it, so there you go.
Your mom likes it? Is that perfect? Wonderful. You have a
I always have discussions with it, and then you get these people. Yeah, but it's not meant like that. I'm like, yeah, but it's doing that, right?
So I think you misunderstand it.
No,
Because you're not dealing with so how do I the problem is that the language they use to describe it is not exactly very helpful.
then I'm not misunderstanding it. It's just the shit system. Like
We can have a
if
discussion about that some other time,
no,
because it's gonna.
no, but I'm trying to make a different point, right? Like when you have a system that's not aligned with truth in the way that you describe it or communicate it, it's a bad system, and it's
Okay.
going to cause problems, and therefore it's evil. Like you shouldn't propagate the system that's going to introduce errors. Like it's not more difficult than that.
Okay, I'm gonna rephrase. Forget internal family systems. I'm gonna tell you how I deal with how I'm able to organize my thoughts. So let's say I'm feeling symptoms of depression. In order to decenter, what works for me sometimes.
Oh, hold on, you said decenter. What does decenter mean?
Recenter. In order to
Okay.
find my centered space where I can have an agapic relationship with myself, what I do is that I imagine there's somebody else with me in the room. Could be that I pray to God. Could be that I talk to Jesus or Muhammad. I just hold myself accountable to somebody else, and I describe to them what is going on in the situation. I describe the symptoms, I describe what I'm feeling as though it's another person in the room with us.
Now that would be prayer, but keep going.
Exactly. So that's what I do. So in this definition, I'm not doing IFS. I'm doing that. So this is what I do. And to take it back to the depression thing and how I do it with Agape, let's suppose this happens. Then what I can do in this case is precisely, once again, imagine there's God with me, or there's Muhammad with me, or Jesus Christ, or a therapist, or something like that, and try to verbalize to them what is going on at the moment. What am I feeling so that this happens? This slows down the process, slows down the thinking process, slows down what happens, so that I can express it verbally and try to reverse engineer what is going on.
But
now, the
why?
reverse.
This. Wait. Now we're like in a place where we're trying to understand what's going on, and like I'm already saying a no to that.
But that's my point. That's where I'm pushing back. I'm saying we understand what is going on in light of Jesus.
Yeah, still no.
Still no? Okay.
Well, okay. Not an absolute no, but like depending on how you formulate that. If you say, I'm understanding what's going on and how I'm losing my connection to Jesus, yes.
What's the other way?
I'm understanding what's going on by talking to Jesus.
No. That's not what I meant. That is not what I meant. I am understanding what is going on in how it is making me lose my connection. Let's just put it this way.
Okay.
This is what I would say. So in this moment, that's where the agape comes in, because you're no longer you're not trying to make anything different. You're just looking at things as they are. What is going on right now? What is going on? You're becoming aware of the process by which the back is going down. So to use a bit of maybe.
Yeah, keep going. I'll
let
you finish.
Yeah. So you're becoming aware by what's happening when I'm putting my back down. It becomes clearer and clearer what the thought process is, where it's coming from, and where it belongs even. That's my point.
Right. But I'm still going to say no on that.
Okay.
Because like you have two directions, right? Like one is you dive into what's going on, right? Like I'm not saying I'm not doing that, right? Like I am.
Sure. Yeah.
we all get sucked up on like, oh, I gotta figure this out. but
Yeah.
it's more, where do I need to be? Right? Like I'm like, where you are has nothing to do with where you need to be. That's the problem. Like that's the mistake we always keep making. Like you're called to do something.
Yeah.
What you're called to do has nothing to do with what you're going through. Like what you're going through might inhibit you from going there.
Yeah.
But that's a different thing, right? Like because
Okay.
now you can identify it as an obstacle, right, to overcome. Because like if you're in the middle of the ocean, right, you could say, well, like I'm in the ocean, it's really deep, like there's water in every direction.
Yes.
Like I feel like I'm drowning. Like you can identify all these things. It's like, okay, so how did that help you? You're still in the ocean. Like these things are still true.
Let me try and rephrase what you just said with an example, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So I'm sitting at home, I'm feeling depressed, and the depression is like a weight. The direction down or horizontally would be to do what I said, understand it, understand what's going on, reverse engineer the process. But what you're saying is heed the calling, and then this is just something in the way. Then all you need to do is participate in the calling, and whatever is going on with you will find its place, will fall into place.
Yeah.
In this context will be the healing, in other words. This context will heal.
That's what healing is. And that's how other people can heal you, right? Because
yes.
Because they're verbalizing the voice of God that calls you out of your stuckness.
Of your stuck that calls you out. Okay. So in that case, that would be sinking even deeper in the roots, in the weeds that are going all over the place, and these demons are dragging you down. So no. Let me restart from the start. So analyzing what's going on, or not analyzing, understanding what is going on.
That's going to the roots, right?
That's going to the roots. That's getting caught up in it again.
Right, that's the rabbit hole.
Yeah, the rabbit hole. Whereas,
and I'm not saying that it can never work, right? Like sometimes you get something in the rabbit hole, but
yes. Yes. Now I see what's going. So there's a movement up and there's a movement down, right?
Right.
And you're saying,
you climb the tree, right?
Yeah.
Up to the branches, and you eat the fruit, right? And the fruit is that which calls you out of.
Right. But the thing is,
this is what I'm talking about, right? So
here's the thing. Yes. Here's the thing. When I'm doing it without the connection to that, I cannot do this, because then I'm caught up in it.
Right.
Then in IFS terminology, I'm blended with it. Yes. Because I think I'm identified with that part. I'm identified with whatever is going on. But when I'm looking up,
caught up in it, right?
Like, caught up in it. You think it's you. You think you're trying to change things from within the perspective, which is obviously just messing things up even more. But maybe that was a bit too dramatic. But in order to actually be able to deal with the roots, you need to know the fruits.
Yeah, but also, like, you don't deal with the roots. You pull out the bad tree. You just get rid of it.
Like, can you give me that in concrete terms?
That's what Jesus did. Like, he went up to this olive tree or whatever, and like he's like, this tree is not giving any fruits. Like, get rid of it.
Give me that in practical terms, in terms of us. So I give you an example.
You get reborn. Like literally, you leave behind that which is not serving you.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, yeah, I understand.
Why do you mess with these roots? Like, these roots has nothing to do with you.
So these are dead roots. Leave them behind and go on. Move forward. That's what you mean.
And like if they're sprouting up a new thing in the future, then you deal with the new thing in the future. Like that if the roots are really, really deep, right? And you're only like relating to the surface layer in your revival, right? You can deal with the other layer when it presents itself. Like I was talking to this guy, and like he got sexually abused, and like he said, I couldn't even see it or something till I was like 36 or whatever. Right? So it's like God protected him from this trauma and having to relate to it till he was at a place that he had the tools to relate to it. Like if you start digging, you're going to find things that you don't have tools for. It's like why do you expose yourself to that? Like
it's like why do you want to open your own car, take it to an engineer to fix it?
Right. Like maybe you need to replace the engine after 5 years instead of trying to repair it 5 times.
Instead of trying to repair it yourself.
Yeah.
And the best person to know what it needs to be repaired is God.
Right.
That's why surrendering to God is the best thing you can do.
Right. And like this is the part that people always don't see, right? It's like when we're messing with things, like we're spending time, well, first of all, looking into the abyss, right? Which is in general a negative, right? Because you're not living in joy and happiness and hope and all that stuff, right? And secondly, you're not using that time to do something wholesome. Like you're not listening to your calling. Like you're literally not obeying God when you're doing that. And it's like, okay, so like there's 2 mistakes. Like I'm turned away, and I'm not having the things happen that need to happen. Now, am I saying that I know how to solve that problem where you do need to put your attention? It's like, no, right? Because like that's the thing that needs to be revealed to you. But in order for it to be revealed to you, you need to be listening, right? So like that's always the thing that I say to people. Is like, maybe I don't have the answer, but like at least I'm trying to find the answer. If you're not trying to find the answer, it's not going to come to you. Like then it's just because then it's like has to like appear right in front of your face at some point, right?
Seek and you shall find.
Right.
Seek and you shall find. Ask and it shall be given unto you.
Yeah, knock and the door will be open.
Knock, it will be open.
And I've been thinking a lot about Genesis because Peugeot was talking a bunch of things. And I'm like, like it's like you have the coming out of the garden, right? Like, so like there's a revelation and a failure there, right? And then there's the trying to reestablish relationship with God, right? But like having a failure there, right? Like which is basically Cain is in some sense, right? it's trying to force the relationship, right? And so that's the second failure, and then you have the flood, right? Which basically means you're focused down too much.
Okay.
Right, and you're trying to get the fruits from the land, right? And then like at a certain point it just wheels over you. Then you have the Tower of Babel, right, where they're looking up too much, right? They're trying to get too high, and that fails as well. And like so, God says like, no, you don't get to do these things. And then, well, I'm not sure what follows because I still need to reread it with that framing in mind. But like in the end, in Revelation, right, you have the New Jerusalem, where basically the picture is being drawn of, well, when ultimately all of these things are fulfilled, this is how the correct relationship is, right? So then you have the waters that are crystallized, right? So they're no longer flooding you, right?
Okay.
And the city itself, right, is all under God, right? And like all the kings come there in order to pay tribute to God, right? So like the building up is also in right relationship, right? And then, but you need to get there, right? And like I think a lot of the Bible is describing this sequential, like, because I think it's actually sequential, like Genesis, right? Like you will really likely be flooded first, which is basically trauma or something, right? And then you will grip to tyranny to never be flooded again, right? To build this high safe place, and then you'll get knocked out of that tower too, right? Like, and I think it always has to take that sequence, right? Like, so first you get identified with, oh my God, like this can happen to me, and then it's like, how do I make that never happen to me, right? Like your life basically gets in service of that, and that needs to get taken out, right? And then you have, what is it, Abraham, who sits in a stand for 100 years, and then God says, no, you need to get out. Like,
yeah.
Right? You see all these things, right? Like that's what people do, right? Like they're like, oh, like this happened to me, and now the logical sequential response is to disentangle from that, right? But then it's like, no, life is calling you, right? And then when you're called in life, like a bunch of stuff happens to you, and then you find yourself in this new place, right? And now you're under a tyrant, right? Like now there's an external imposition as opposed to an internal imposition. And now you have to be worthy of your place so that you can escape that tyranny as well, right? And like I think that's where a lot of society is stuck, right? It's like, ooh, like society is a tyranny, right? There's all these social constructs. It's like, yeah, but like, what are you doing to make it better, right? Like you're just creating more social constructs.
You're creating another narrative.
Yeah, yeah, right. But it's a narrative that is, and that this is what liberalism is, right? Like liberalism is creating the new narrative that we can live in, so that we are liberated from the old narrative. Like, and liberalism resulted in the postmodernism, right? Which is kind of like the rejection of this idea by ultimate liberty in some sense, right? Like this what's queerism, right? Like which is literally identified by identifying against. It's like all the norms need to be thrown out. Because what was it? I was reading a Dutch tweet, and they were saying they're reinforcing the cisgender norms or something, right? And I'm like, why don't you say norms? Like why are you adding cisgender norms? Like, no, those are the norms. People are reinforcing the norm. Like they're not reinforcing the cisgender norms, because like adding these things, like you're just confusing. Like it seems that you're trying to be more explicit, but you're actually confusing it, because it's like you're delegitimizing them, the norm, by putting it in a motivational structure, as opposed to that which is revealed from God.
You're replacing one tyranny with another.
Yeah, that's what you. Well, but like even God is a king, right? Like he's a tyrant, right? Like the only reason to follow God is because he's good, right? Like, and like that's rough, right? Like especially if you have a shitty life, like to hear that. And like what does that even mean? Like what does it mean that God is good? Like does it mean that everything that happens to you is pleasant? No. Like the goodness is not, like that's not the dimension of goodness. Like that's not
Goodness is not positive.
right. Like
Mark said that. Mark said that once. Yeah.
yeah, like goodness don't give no shits about your feeling, just like truth give no shits about your feeling. I'm gonna have to make a tweet like that.
Goodness doesn't give a shit about your feelings.
Yeah.
I think that's a too. I don't think this makes the message very clear of what you're trying to say. It doesn't help the message, because I would phrase it differently. Don't do what feels good. Do what is good. Because often it is the case that what is good doesn't feel good.
Yeah. But the point is, right? Like people think that goodness is caring, right? And the care, like okay, like God is a good God, right? God will take care of you, right? And like when I hear that in church, right? Like sometimes I'm like I was on Twitter talking to this Orthodox guy, and I'm like, God let the martyrs die for him, right? Like, like he let his own son die. And I'm like, I mean, any human measure of care, right, would not think that a good thing, right? Like, so, and his response was, yeah, but they're alive with God now, and therefore they didn't die. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, but also that's cheating, right? It's like they still died, right? Like they still had a
I
physical
think
death.
that's a very narrow way of thinking of caring. Because you're
For me,
talking about, in general, because we are confusing care with material or bodily well-being.
yeah, but you have to have something to care about.
Yeah.
Well, like, and the problem is, okay, so to go back to the roots, right? And like Vivek did this whole thing about what's the self, blah blah blah, right? And like I get into a lot of like, yeah, because if you identify yourself wrongly, what care means will change. Well, like whatever identity you assume, right? Like if I assume the identity of a woman, cutting off my genitals and having hormone therapies is the right thing, right? Like that's what care would implore me to do.
Okay.
Right. So this caring combined with the relativism, right, or the lack of a standard,
creates parasitic processing.
Yeah, but it's also right. Like you don't have the standard to appeal to, right? So you can't.
Yes. You don't have the absolute. You don't see the bigger picture. You only see yours. And when you're caring, when your agape is asking what is good for this, you are still at risk of missing the mark because you don't know the bigger picture. God knows the bigger picture, which is why you need a standard. And this is where religion, this is where Christ, this is where scripture comes in.
Right. That's why God needed to be embodied, right? Because if God doesn't become man, right? Like, how do we have a standard?
Okay.
Right. Because if we don't have a human version of God, we're just back into relativism, right? It's like, oh, this person.
Yeah. Sure. We're back into relativism because then everybody has their own standard of what is good. And
Right.
then everything is just chaotic. No, there is no absolute standard. There is no meta perspective. There's only several goods being done for their own good, and then you have a clash of goods together, contradicting say, which is actually the state of the world, which is actually what it's like when the rich guy collects all the money for himself. It's like, yeah, I'm doing my own good, right? But hey, doing your own good, it's not good for other people. So
yeah, but maybe holding on to that money is better than him spending it, because like he could spend it wrongly, right? And then there's all of this energy putting into a system that's bad.
yeah, I mean, this
Like
goes,
for example, like people like Bill Gates, right? I'm like, I don't know how happy I am with him spending his money to do good.
you don't know if it's being spent on the right good.
Well, like even if it is, right, like it's creating these forces in the world, and like it might actually end up being a net bad, even though it was good. Like this is where the right, this is where you get into this complexity. Like if we're doing this, right, like
So it's again the same thing that the people from the Bible Project say. They keep saying this, that this is when man takes matters into their own hands,
yes,
and this is where the chaos happens. And so when
right,
Bill Gates is doing all this quote unquote good without a reference to a standard like the Bible, for example, he's taking matters into his own hands. He's only doing good in terms of the local picture, not in terms of the bigger picture. So this is going to lead to this at some point.
right. Like the same as with the West, like funding Ukraine. It's like you're holding something in place, right? Like you're holding this conflict in place that should be resolved. Like that conflict could have been resolved.
Right. You're dealing with the symptom basically. You're just giving it a sedative, or giving it rather steroids, so that it grows stronger against another part of the body, but that ends up causing more conflict between the body parts.
Yeah, and they're not doing it to help Ukraine, right? They're doing
Yeah,
it out
yeah,
of
of course.
fear for
The
Russia.
intention is wrong. The
Yeah,
intention is wrong. That makes it even worse and more evil, more participation in the
right.
evil.
And yeah, like therefore good cannot come of it, right? Like it's yeah.
Well, you can't say that because it could be that God's will is working through them. I don't know that.
Yeah,
Maybe God's will is
I
working
don't know.
through them, but I don't know.
Like
I
this
have no
is
idea.
this is now we're in Calvinism, dude. Like if you're going there, it's like, well, like my sin was necessary for God to reveal His true plan to me. And it's like, really, dude?
No,
Like,
no, that's not what I mean. It's like this is making excuses now. That's making excuses. But
no, it's not. No. Like that's what Calvinism effectively says, right? Like you're predestined to either come to God, right? Therefore, God organized either your life to meet Him or not to meet Him, right? It is, and that's like taking this idea of redemptive quality, and like it's removing your part of it in it, right? No, I'm not an absolute purist in the sense of like, oh, you cannot sin or whatever. Like I think we're doomed to sin, and sometimes we have to pick the lesser evil, but also we need to ask God to solve it for us before we do that, right? And or for the strength just to take the hit ourselves, right? Like yeah, like sometimes we
right.
can, like fine.
So there's a bit of a itch stuck in my head regarding the whole goodness and caring thing, and I think this is going to link us back to agape. So no, I think it's good that we went in this direction, because there's a verse in the Bible which I love very much, and I'm afraid of very much. It says God is agape, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that goodness does not mean care, because clearly there's a lot of people dying. There's a lot of martyrs dying. So
Well, it depends, right? Like care is conditional, right? So if I care about your soul and not your body, like I don't give a shit if you die.
That was my point. That was where I was going with it. That actually, this is a bit of a selfish question, to be honest, because this is a very sensitive topic for me. When we're talking about the goodness of God towards you, we're talking about the goodness of God towards the whole. And that means you might end up getting hurt, but in the long run, you'll end up in a good place. I don't know if this goes in this direction.
Yeah, well, that depends on how you think of the afterlife. Like I'm not there yet with all
Okay. Yeah.
the like we're coming back again and God will set things right in the end or whatever, right? Like I don't feel the need to go there,
Okay.
and I've not seen the justification for going there. I think all of this afterlife stuff is just understandable in the spirit, right? So there's a spirit of man that is in communion with God, and either you contribute to that or you detract to that, right? And if you contribute to that, that means that you will go to heaven, right? And you'll partake in the glory that gives, right? But that also means, well, like what, like how is that glory and how is it given to you? Well, it's not a thing that you can enjoy on earth, right? Like that's and so like what how do you end up? Well, you end up in this. Well, like there's two things, right? Like either you're in this stream, right? Like this spirit of history that's going towards God. Like I'm almost in Hegel now, right?
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing right now. but I'm with that. I like that expression. I think
right.
of it a lot.
So either you're in that spirit, right, or you're not, right? But if you're not in that spirit, like there's nothing that remembers you, right? Because like you're isolated or you separate, right? Like
okay.
Like what is your
You're
what is
just a
your
bag in the wind.
identity bound?
You're a bag in the wind. You're a bag in the wind in that case.
Right. And so you can see it as this wind, like literally the spirit, right? This wind blowing through time, right? And then there's things that are in the center in the stream, and then there's things that circle around further and further away, and they become obsolete. And those that are carried in the wind, they participate in the fulfillment that will eventually come of that spirit.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you see yourself as receiving as your name, right? Like your name describes who you are, right? Like eventually your name, right, who you are, will be fulfilled in the fulfillment of time.
Yeah. It goes back to the translation of eternal life from Hebrew, which is life unto the age, instead of living forever. So God will give you life unto the age in the sense that your spirit will come to full fruition, not in this body, but as a part of the body of earth.
Right.
So that your actions live on, your spirit lives on. Whatever you contributed to the world in goodness lives on with other people. And that's what eternal life in a sense is.
Right. Like so that's how I think of heaven.
That's kind of also how a part of me thinks of it as well. I've had the same thoughts as well.
I'd love to have people tell me how you can reasonably add more to that. right? Because like I don't see a step beyond that, but like maybe there is, like I don't know.
If for me, I'm also open. And I'm, to be honest, the only thing keeping me open to that is fear of hellfire. Like fear of hellfire is the. I don't know if it gets in the way or if it motivates the process, but I know that the only thing that gets me thinking of an afterlife is the fear of a scary afterlife. That's the only thing that gets me thinking about it. And just let me circle back to agape with that, because there's an important point I think I need to make. I think that spirit that you're talking about is agape. Well, at least it's agapic. I don't want to reduce it to anything, but I think it's very agapic. In what sense? In the sense that the ideal world is a world where everybody has that orientation of agape.
Right.
And we are in a world which is mixed. You have people who are agapic and not agapic. And this is why you get all these problems. So this world is a demonstration of what it is like to have light and shadows. Shadows is where the agape is not present, where you're selfish, where you're self-centered. And the light is where the agape is present, the opening up to the good, the you know, caring for things exactly as they are. And this spirit that you're talking about, this flow of history, is basically this agape fulfilling itself. Because technically speaking, this agape is at the core of everything. This unfolding, bringing to life, this asking what is good for this and giving it its good, this is the core of everything.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I like the word life, right? Like it's a life-giving spirit.
Yes.
And it gives lives true agape. Right. And then you get into this of what is caring, right? And then it means that you are superseded by the spirit, right? And that your individual contribution is going to be sacrificed to that spirit, just like Christ, right? And like there's going to be lesser and greater sacrificing.
Yeah. Your full embodiment of the spirit is in being an absolute agapic person like Christ, who basically died for everybody. And in being that, and by being caring unconditionally to everybody else, by allowing yourself to sacrifice your body for everybody else, you are fully embodying the Spirit of God, even though it's bad for you.
And you're saved from death, right?
And you're saved from death at the same time, exactly, which is
right?
paradoxical.
Because now death doesn't have any hold over you.
Because your identity is no longer grounded in anything that dies. Your identity is grounded in the absolute.
Right.
Which is this agapic spirit.
Yes, right. Or in other words, yeah, you don't care about the self in a way that you would worry about losing it.
Yeah. Exactly. Very good. Very
And
good.
this is why Mary is super important.
I love it.
Right?
I love it. Yeah, I love it.
Because she said yes to God. Right? And she sacrificed her son in the saying yes.
Okay.
And like that's also what we're called to do, right? Like we are called to bring into being things that we sacrifice back to being. Right? And that's what when we work, we call it labor, right?
Yeah, we're giving birth. Yeah, we're giving
yes,
birth.
We're giving birth back to being.
We're giving birth back to being, yeah. Because technically, I mean, this is something that Schindler says, I mean, that being is giving and giving is being. So you are mostly yourself when you are giving the most. You are given the most when you are giving the most.
Well, there's two ways, right? You can be taken as well. Right? So you can be caught up in something. Right? Like so when the verb to be something, right, means that you're under it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You're partaking in that what you are. It's not
Yes.
that you are having that.
Yeah. True.
No,
Absolutely.
it is having
Absolutely.
you,
Yes, it's
right?
having you. It's having you.
And
Yeah.
now I was talking to someone in church a while back, and he said we've been given power over the angels by Christ, right? And so, like, what does it mean? Well, it means that you choose what you're subjected to,
Mm.
and you can say you can reject.
Freedom to, freedom from, freedom to. You
Well,
choose your
but
freedom too.
you can see it like this, right? Like I just listened to something about the Kabbalah where they were trying to talk about the second nature of God, and I'm like, why are like that's literally Christ what you're talking about at this point, right? Like because they like the Jews cannot make an image of God, but like Moses talked to a face, so that's an image of
The
God, but
fire. Yeah.
it cannot be God. But if it's not God, then it's idolatry, and like so they're stuck in this loop, right? And and so the thing, the move that they made is like, no, like there's like Praveki calls it the divine darkness and the divine light, right?
Yeah.
You have the part of God that's outside of creation, and then you have something that shines into it, which is
Yes.
a
Yes.
super angel,
Yeah.
which is that which reveals itself to being, right? It's like now you're at Christ, like that's what Christ is, like that's literally the identity that Christ assumes.
The shining in.
Well, it's the word, right? Like it's like what's the word? Well, when I speak, right? Like it's the spirit that leaves me, right? Like the word is not me, right? Like the
It's that thing leaving you and living on beyond you.
right, like it's like a footprint, right? Like it's like
Footprint.
my
Yes.
mark.
It's a volatile footprint that transfers not only you but also the spirit. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it's my spiritual footprint, right? But
It's
yeah,
your spiritual footprint. Yeah. I don't want to say magic word, but the word that's coming is this symbolic aspect of you that goes and remains in the world.
right. And so the point there is like I don't know how I got there, but this idea that there's something of God that that is of this world, right? Because it has to be, and that we can have a relationship. Oh yeah, that's the point of, and that's just super, right? Like it's above all the other angels. It's sitting on the throne. Like they're using literally the same imagery as in Revelations, which is so funny. It's just trying to stay away from Christianity and ending up there, but whatever. So it's sitting on the throne, which means that it rules that which is below it, right? And thereby, right, if you're subservient to this instead of the angel, you can swap angel.
Yeah.
But if you're not, you cannot swap angel because there's no higher authority that hierarchically organizes that which is below.
Yeah.
And that's the whole trick.
Yeah.
And like to give credit to the Jews, right? Like, yeah, you don't want to identify not the highest as the highest. Like, yes, that's bad. Although I'm not with them in that you cannot worship or pray to that, through that. Like maybe not to that, but through it, right? Because like if that is your entry into God, because you're gonna have to have an entry into God. Like you can't have a no entry. Like this, you can't have a non-relational relation, right? Like there's always gonna be a vessel or a layer in which you're communing with. And so that's so you're always stuck in a somewhat idolatrous relationship, right? Because like that's gonna be a crystallization, like it's gonna
Yeah. I mean, you're always a limited being. You always have some egoic identity, and that's always going to necessitate an other to talk to, and therefore you're always somehow condensing God into a thing. That's always
yeah,
happening.
but like Yeah, but not even that, right? Like you don't even have to condense God into a thing, right? Like when I touch you, right?
Yeah.
I am not relating to you. I'm relating to a piece of your skin,
Okay.
right? And so like I have to do that in order to feel you,
Yeah.
but I'm not feeling you, right? Like I'm
Mm.
not. I'm feeling a piece of your skin at a single point. And so like this is like it's really obvious. Like this problem with God exists between people. Like
That's a big discussion because I have my own thoughts, but it's going to take us to a whole different place now. Because when you're touching my skin, you're touching not me, you're touching an aspect of me.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ever touch you?
You can never touch me. That's true. I'm
Okay,
untouchable.
then we have the same issue as with God. We can never touch God.
Exactly. But that's the thing. I'm a person. I can be spectralized. Can you spectralize God?
A
Can God?
spiritualization is not a quality of you, it's a quality of the relationship to you.
That's a good point. We need to think about this one. Yeah, I need to think about this one. Whether spectralizing something. So in this case,
Even
in
in
this
relation
case,
to God.
but in this case, Christ is not a part of God. It's Christ is quality of the relationship.
No,
Christ,
but like but
no.
hold on. Like okay, to go back to speaking, right?
Mm,
Like and is what I speak me?
no, it's an
Well,
aspect
I
of you.
think it is.
It is.
Well, like because how else would you know me?
Well, symbolically, yes. Symbolically, it is you.
No. Like I'm literally saying that the spirit that I breathe out is all there is to me.
I'm having difficulty following. Elaborate on that.
Okay, like what is there to know about me? I'll help you.
Mm?
What there is to know about me is the way I make things move, which is my spirit.
Yeah, but what about the principle behind the way you're making things move?
That's not me,
So that's okay. I see.
right?
I
Like
see.
how's that me?
I see. I see. So you're basically you are your soul.
Well, no, like the soul I see. I'm using Plato here, but
Mm.
like I see the soul as that which is the lens by which you look up to heaven,
Okay.
which is basically a filter on the heavenly, distorting it into the earthly so that I can have a
Yes.
spirit.
Yes. Yes. So that you
Right.
can
So
have a
so so
spirit.
just to look at it like it's like a sieve with holes, right? And like there's this water that's coming through the sieve.
Yes.
And
Yes.
now
Yes.
I'm obviously not getting the same identical stream as water because I have these funky holes through which the water
Yeah.
flows.
Yeah. Sure. It gives them form. It gives them thingness.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's unique to me, right?
Yeah.
Like that's my fingerprint.
It's your fingerprint.
That's how you get to know me.
Yes. Yeah, I'm seeing something, but my cognition is failing me at this point. So, technically speaking, you're the configurer. You
No,
are
I'm
this
knitting. I'm
lens, which
knitting,
is
right? Like
hmm?
I'm knitting the
Yes,
matter, right? The
yeah,
material, that the potential into the divine that I am in relation to.
Is the potential the spirit?
No,
No.
the potential is the matter, right? Like the earth.
No. I mean, no. Sorry. Not like that. Not like that. I mean, you have heaven and earth, right?
Mhm,
Earth is potential, as you're saying, that can become that which can become.
mhm,
Heaven is the standard, right? Possible. So heaven is spirit.
mhm,
Your spirit is up here. Your potential is here, and you are that mediator. You are
mhm.
that. Okay.
Well, yeah. Like I am formed in the expression in time, right?
Yes. Yeah, because the soul unfolds in time. That's terrifying, by the way,
Why?
because you realize how limited you are. And you also realize that,
No, that's like it's not terrifying. It's also not limiting. It's super liberating. Like now you're caring about the wrong thing, right?
yeah, no, that's not how I meant it. It's not really how I meant it. I meant it more in the sense that your mortality is not in your hands. It's not something, it's not something you can take for granted because your immortality is in the hands of God. Whether or not you exist is in the hands of God.
Yes.
And your identity is basically in this soul. That radically challenges the way I think about it, by the way.
Well,
Because
that's
I
why you have
was,
to give the glory back to God, right?
yeah, exactly.
Because if you don't give the glory back to God, right? Like now the sieve is gonna be self-referential, right?
Hmm.
And you're gonna have these streams of water. They don't flow through the sieve, right? But they start doing loop-de-loops,
Yeah.
and they start building up pressure, and then you get a headache, like literally, right?
Yeah,
Like
I do
this
have
all of
that headache.
this energy that does not get proper expression in,
Yeah.
and then it builds up, right? And then
Builds
it
up.
starts getting its own
Yeah,
causal.
yeah, yeah. The self-reference thing, it doesn't breathe life into you because you need the heaven to imprint onto earth for the process to take place to begin with. And when you're only the soul that has picked up so many things from heaven and thinks this is you, and you keep trying to imprint this, nothing's going to happen because the power is not with you. It's from the flow from heaven to earth.
Right, and even if you had a proper relationship to heaven, which you probably didn't, right? Like now you crystallize that relation, right? So now instead
Exactly.
of having the dynamical adaptive nature,
Hmm.
you're gonna only produce the same thing, right?
You're going to be imposing. You're going to be imposing. You're
Yeah,
going
well,
to be
like
keep trying to
at a
impose.
certain point, right? Like if you always do the same thing, you're gonna make a transgression, right? Like because
Hmm.
it's not always the right answer,
This
and
is
like
why. Hmm.
well, to go back to the not doing the right thing also being wrong, right? It's like just going through the motions. Like this is what they talk about with NPCs or zombies. Like going through the motions isn't good enough, people. Like it's not good enough. Having found the pattern that you're not suffering is not heaven. Like it's not. And it's gonna lead you to hell. Like that's.
Hmm. Yeah, this is opening up a lot of questions in my head. Centrally, what the most important question it's opening up right now is what I'm taking for granted in regards to God right now. Because I mean, now the question is
But
becoming,
it's again, you're doing it wrong. It's not relevant.
what's not relevant? I forgot what I said.
What are you taking for granted? Like I take a bunch of things for granted. You have to,
Hmm.
right? Like it's not optional. The question is whether you hold on to it or not. That's right. It's
Hmm.
not. It's not
Right,
cool.
right, 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 right. Focus on what's in the field of consciousness,
Right.
not
Do
what's
you
in the
let
field of
yourself
unconsciousness.
die and be reborn in God? or not. Like that's because you're not going to figure it out, right? And like okay, let me phrase it differently. Like you might figure out like 5,000 things about how you're misunderstanding God. Do you think that was important to figure those 5,000 things out?
No, I've done it several times, and every time I was wrong.
No. Like,
Yeah.
do you think you'd be a better person as a consequence of doing it?
I don't know.
Well, exactly, because you can't. Because
I don't
you
know.
don't know
I
if they're
don't
going to
know.
be relevant, right?
Yeah,
Like you
I have no
don't
idea.
know if that understanding of God is actually going to help you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
what you do know is when you're confronted with something that you at that point need to find the right relationship to God. That's what you do know. So you can either look back at the past, and I was talking to Nick about relating to the past, right? You can look back at the past and try to correct how you were wrong in the past, or you make sure that you're the being that can do the right thing in the future. And those two are not the same thing. Like they're completely different. Because like what is dealing with trauma, right? Like dealing with trauma is a self-optimization for a certain spirit. But if that's not the spirit you're called to live in, then what good is this optimization going to do for you?
Yeah. Because again, it's imposing, putting on a mold that's too tight for the body.
Right. And that optimization is going to reinforce a mold that's not the mold.
That's not
that is
the
meant for you.
mold that's going to. This is resonating so much with me. Because this tight mold metaphors, they come up a lot in my head, and I tend to do that a lot. That I mold myself with respect to something that's refusing to happen, somehow convinced that I should do that.
And
Mm.
well, yeah, you have the other side of the problem as well, right? Like Mark is saying, call out evil, right? Even badly, right? And there's something to that, right? Like sometimes you need to put your foot down, and you're gonna have to be rigid, because if you're not rigid, things will corrupt.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
And
there's no absolute.
that is the big question, right? Like when do you give more rope to the fish, and when do you
yank it back?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you don't
yeah.
want to snap that rope, right?
No, you don't want to snap that rope. I've snapped it several times.
Yeah.
Um,
But if you leave too much rope, which is what we're doing now, you're never going to catch that fish. You're just going to swim with a hook.
Yeah, you're just going to swim with the hook. Yeah. I mean, going back to Agape, let me try to trace my thoughts back to how do I link everything together. So one thing that is glaring at me right now is something you keep repeating several times. It's the proper relationship to God, dying towards God. What does that look like? What is that exactly?
Well, I'm actually looking at the background, which is Leonardo da Vinci with the fetuses, right?
Yeah.
And there's a being born, right? Like that's what a fetus is. And then I'm going back to Genesis, right? And it's like, okay, so you're going into life, and flood happens. You're overwhelmed, right? And then you're like, oh, and you start building your tower, right? And instead of holding on to your tower, you throw it up. and then you leave your tent again, right? And you do all of that voluntarily, right? Because you know it's the right thing. And then, well, what do you need to do? Well, you need to climb the mountain to listen to God, right? So there's all these laws, right? Like, and these laws are given down to others because they've been on the mountain before you, and these laws might be verbalized, but more importantly, they're spoken in action, right? Like and like this is why people think things are obvious, right? Like, because they see people doing right action, but like that right action didn't come from nowhere, right? Like that, there's a whole history, a whole spirit that is actually giving the strength in the moment for that action to manifest. And so you're going to have to relate to that spirit. And well, what does that mean? Is you have to humble yourself, right? Like you have to step out of the way, right? And see. Well, to go back to agape, right? Like, okay, like you have a role, right? Like there's the will of God that is manifesting within you, and then there's other things that manifest within you, and you're going to have to ally, right? You're going to have to help that spirit of God conquer you, right? Like
that still sounds very abstract. So the way I'm translating it in my head is more of surrender to the fact that you know nothing. Surrender to your calling, actually. If you're being called, heed the calling and see where that takes you. This is how I'm translating it in my head.
Well, I'm just going to go to the Lord's Prayer. Like I should have already written an article on it, but like I'm going to try and finish an article on that this week.
Yeah.
Right. So, my Lord who are in heaven, hallowed be your name. Right. So first, who's the guy? Right. We're identification. We're naming. Right. So we're first attending. Right. And then we're identifying, and then from the name, thy kingdom comes, right? So there's something that flows from there. Thy will be done, as in heaven, will be on earth, right? So like you have this whole thing. Okay, so the kingdom has a will, right? Like I can participate in it. Will gets expressed from heaven to earth, right? So like that's my mediation. Then it starts talking about forgiveness. Right, like so forgiveness means, which I translate as humility, right? Like forgiveness is how you become humble, right? Because if you're not forgiving, you're standing in the place of God.
Yeah.
Right, like you're in the place of judgment. If you're forgiving, you're leaving open place for miracles.
That resonates. Yeah, that resonates.
And then I think the last part is daily bread, right? Which basically means that you have to fill yourself, just like you have to feed yourself with food. You have to fill yourself with your spiritual sustenance in order to be part of that kingdom, right? And you can only partake of that sustenance if you're humble, right? If you're not in a jaded relationship, right? Because if those emotions are the spirit in which you interpret things, right? Like you're not going to receive the revelation because you have a veil in front of your eyes. I think in the Bible they use scales, right? Like there's scales that cover your eyes. And so like that, well, there's a bunch of things, right? So it says heaven go to earth, and then basically remove the scales, and then find the grounding in the reference, well, in the literature, in the divine literature that's
yeah.
to have you see how you should interpret your position. Right? So that's the superimposition of the will of God, of the Spirit through history, that can now make itself known to you at the current point in time, right? And then you can go back to your will be done, because now you have identified the. And the more scripture or whatever you've internalized, right, the more truth you will recognize, and the more capable you'll be to execute it. And then you can say, well, yeah, we also need patience, right? Like in order to see these things, you need to take a step back, right? You need to so you need to not be impulsive, and well, there's a bunch of things that come.
Yeah. I mean, Lectio Divina, like Lectio Divina in this place. It's like really reading for transformation and not just jumping into conclusion. Really trying to see the world through the scripture. Really trying to suspend the scales, suspend what you already know, look through it, and then come back. Humility, forgiveness, purification.
Well, yeah, we can go to humility, because I think if we want to go back to this idea of agape, right? Like what is humility? Well, humility is putting yourself into the place that agape is available to you.
Interesting. I like that. Humility is putting yourself in the place that agape is available to you. So that's suspending the scales. No?
No, it's more that God can take the scales off your eyes. Because you don't get to take away the scales. Like, that's not a thing you can do.
I need to process this one.
Like, that's one of the things that I'm like working on with all these practices, because I'm like, there's a way in which these skills can be removed, and I do think that participating with others in communion to God is allowing you to get rid of the skills. Right?
So what I'm doing right now is an act of that. This opening up. I mean, this is at least my intention to be proven wrong, in a certain not to be proven wrong, but to sort of, because doing this by myself, and assuming I'm doing everything right, that's not wise. But by talking to you, talking to other people, I'm opening up myself to correction. And that's the humility you're talking about.
Right, and
part of it, yeah.
Viveki had this interesting example about, well, his kid can only see this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When he looks at his kid, he can see his kid and what he's looking at and what he's missing, right? So when we're in communion and I have scales on my eyes, and like I probably do, right? Then you hopefully should be able to identify where my scales and my eyes are, right? But then you have to take out the log out of your eyes first before you can start.
Yeah.
So like that's the hard part, right? And it's like, don't judge, let you be judged, right?
Yes.
It's like do you want to speak? Because if you're speaking, you better damn well make sure that you're not deluded, right? And like this is where people get upset with me. It's like, because I'm really confident about some things, because like I am certain that like, not that I have the complete picture, but what I have is correct, right? The part that I have, and that judges people, right? And like people don't want to be judged, and they also feel self-incapable of judging, right? So that's how we get back into this relativism frame. It's like, okay, like Plato goes into this, by the way, right? But I don't know the truth, right? Because like I'm just this leaf on the waves, and like when the sun is this way, then I think about it this way, and when it's the other way, like. But if you're standing on solid ground, like people on the waves, they don't know what it's like to stand on solid ground, right? So they can't be receptive to what you have to bring, right? This is what they're talking about. Like if you would have been outside of the cave and you would be placed back into the cave, they would not believe you. And even worse, right? Like if you try to bring them the truth, they will actually try and murder you, because like now you're screwing up their lives, and like you're doing things that are evil in their eyes. And this is why prophets are hated in their own lands, right?
You're not capable of receiving the correction from the person who is judging them.
And this is why Jesus ran. Like Jesus was a, well, I'm not going to say a pussy, but like he snuck out a bunch of times in the Bible, right? So he's like stirring up a shit show, and then he's like, okay, I'm gone.
Bye, see ya.
Right? And
because he knows he's pissing people off, just like Socrates. Socrates was also pissing people off.
Right, and like, well, if you want to have a criticism about me, right, it's like I don't let go, right? Like I bite on something like a pit bull, and like I want to wrestle that one till it's dead.
Yeah.
Right? And at a certain point, the wrestling is not serving the other person.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and then it's only serving me. And like so if there's a sin, that's my sin. Okay. Sorry, people. I'm gonna have to say sorry to my parents.
You're admitting your own sin.
And I've been getting way better with that.
No, you are.
But again, like sometimes you have to wrestle someone to the ground. Like that also needs to happen.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you have to wrestle someone to the ground, especially if they're wrestling you. Then you have to wrestle back.
I was reading Jesus with the moneylenders. So I learned something about the moneylenders. So apparently the Roman coins had the emperor on them. So they were not allowed in the temple. So that's why they had to exchange the coins so that they could pay with. But that happened inside the temple. So they still introduced the deification, right? The deified image. So that was a big transgression. So that's one thing. But the other thing is, at least in the translation that I read, Jesus made his own whip, right? So he entered the temple and he was like, wow. And then he's like, well, let's see, like, let's get myself some cords and then bind them together.
Yeah.
So he's there and he's like, okay, like, I'm going to whip your ass as soon. And everybody's like, in some sense, they're in suspended judgment, right? But like, on the other hand, like nobody knew what was going to happen. Right?
I love that scene. It's my favorite scene ever. One of my favorite scenes.
But just imagine this mental space that you're in, right? Where you're just standing there and you're like, oh, okay, like I'm going to make this whip. And soon I'm going to like.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like the person that he was, like that, like.
He wrestled them to the ground, basically.
Yeah. He's like, this is not going to stand.
Like, shoo, go away.
Exactly. And it's interesting because like there was people that sold sheep, right, or lambs, I think, cows. So he shoot those people and their animals away. But the pigeons, which are representatives of the heavenly coming in, right? He told them to leave, right? Like the pigeon cells with the pigeons. So he didn't set the pigeons free. It's interesting how, like, I don't really know what to make of it, but like how he, and after that, he turned the tables, and again, I don't know if this is a translation issue, but it said the small change, right? So that implies that the big money was taken with them or whatever, right? And but it's also like the flipping of the tables, like it's a, when you set a table somewhere, you're taking place, right? Like and you're setting the scene, right? Like you're dictating, like Peterson says that, right? Like when you walk into a room, you know what's expected of you. Right? When that table is there, there's a spirit, right? Like, this is the broken windows theory, right? Like when the streets are clean, these things happen. When you let people live on the streets, other things happen. And so yeah, there's this idea that the temple, which is the mountain, right? Like it's the connection with the heavenly, got populated with the earthly, right? Like it got confused, and the proper reverence was no longer able to take place because the corruption, not literally, right? And so why am I going here? Oh yeah, agape. So I think when we're talking about humility, right? Like we gotta get this purity going, right? Like we gotta purify that, where basically we've lifted up the earthly things to function as heavenly, and they have to go down so that we can start clearing the temple, and then only then we can see the temple for what it is. Because before that, we cannot relate to the temple as such, because we're, well, the spirit that's there, right? Like this, the scene that's set is not the proper scene.
So, just warning, I need to go in 15 minutes, but I'm gonna go with an explosive questions. I think we're gonna need a part 2 for this. So I'm gonna go with an explosive question. There's definitely gonna be a part 2. Isn't this what you're doing when you're meditating?
Depends. You should be, but
Yeah. I mean, this is what you ideally should be doing when you're meditating.
but no, and
No?
and I like, this is why there's stages, right? Like I don't think you can, right? Like I said, right? When I meditate, like, and I've had hits like that literally, right? Like meditation, like I got like something like a panic attack, right? Like sometimes you just smack yourself so hard that you go into, so no, like you don't get to do that with meditation. Like the idea of meditation is that by continual attendance you get there. But again, right, like you have this issue of self-delusion. Like you bring yourself with you in meditation. Like this was the big problem when we're doing the Sangha on the awakening from the meaning crisis. It's like people just end up playing out what's in their head.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true.
What else are they gonna
That's
do?
true. That is true. That is true. It's not just that they delude themselves into thinking that they're actually meditating when they're actually not meditating. That's also something that's happening.
Right. And like, how else is it gonna be when you have a teacher on the internet? And like, even if you have a teacher in real life, like in order for that teacher to see, right, to agapically hand you the relational configuration that you need in that moment, like, I don't know, if you're capable of doing that reliably, like that's miracle, right? Like then you're a healer. Like I don't know what else to say.
So that's the point. I'm not talking about meditation in the conventional sense. I'm talking about what meditation claims to be trying to do, which is clear the mind, focus on a single task, and be observant of the mind, looking at the mind and not through the mind.
Yeah, okay, but now now you're coming at the problem that I have, right? So now it's like, okay, focus on the task. What task and why?
Then it becomes overthink. Yeah. I get what you're doing. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
It's like, okay, like
I have that too, by the way. I have that too. Yeah.
no, but like it's not overthinking. It's like, okay, like now you need to import something, right? Like you need to take something from somewhere else and say this is good, and therefore I should be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like explain, please, right? Like where did you get this? Like why is this a good thing? And like a lot of this meditation basically says no, there is no good, right? There's only bad, and you should be not bad. And that's a nihilistic view, right? Like the nihilistic view is there's nothing to work towards. There's just liberation from that which traps you. And so they're not looking up.
They're not looking up if they're doing only meditation. But that's the point. You're not supposed to be doing only meditation. You're also supposed to be doing contemplation practices along with it.
Yeah, but then you're importing something, right?
But then that's the thing. Then it's a question of what you're contemplating. Are you contemplating the word of God, or are you contemplating something else? Then it kind of fits together, and there's where it goes back to the temple thing, the temple idea. Because when you're doing the meditation contemplation combination, that rhymes, meditating is allowing the judgment, is allowing the scales, noticing the scales, looking at the scales. Contemplation is taking up other scales or experimenting with other scales.
So I think meditation from a Christian perspective is looking how you fit in, right? Placing yourself in the middle, in the medium, right? And the contemplation is that you're looking out at what is, like that which is around you, which is somewhat of a scientific
yes asking yourself what really is the case. How are things really?
Right. Well, how is the thing that I'm fitting into?
That's also agapic, though, because in order to
no, it should be like
it should be agapic. Yeah, it should be agapic. Yeah,
like all of these people is like, what was it? Oh yeah, tolerance. Like tolerance is emergent redemption. That's what I wrote today on Twitter. Like what does that mean? Well, when you tolerate something, you basically assume that what you tolerate will be redeemed without you interfering. But like that's not gonna happen. Right? Like the chance that that's going to happen will only happen if the person that you're tolerating is a good person. If they're not a good person, then they can't self-correct. Like it's
yeah. That's something I had to find out the hard way. Yeah. I mean, that's also an issue in meditation, because when you're tolerating a parasite, it infects you, and that's basically what happens.
Well, that's one of the dangers of meditation. Okay,
that's one of the dangers of meditation.
You're paving the road for something bigger than you to be more dominant,
No, you're not doing that. I have to
No, you
defend
can
that.
be doing that,
It
though.
can be doing that. You can be doing that, but you're not doing that. But you're not supposed to be doing that, and that's where it's
But how do
dangerous.
you know? Like you don't know if you're doing that or not, because it's bigger than you. Like you don't know how you're influenced by that which
Because
is
it unfolds over a long time span, so it might be subtly taking advantage of you, and you don't notice that. That's what you mean.
right. Like
Okay.
there's no way for you to know.
Mm.
And like this is why it's really dangerous, because it's all self-referential, the meditation, because like I can't get into your head. It's like we had that in the meditation sangha, like people started talking about what they were doing, and I'm like listening, and I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. I hope you wake up tomorrow. Right? Like no, but like for real, like some people I'm like, how are you alive? Like, how are you able to function in society and not die immediately by being run over by a car or whatever?
How do you make decisions in your life? How is this still here? Yeah, I have that attitude towards some people as well.
And yeah, like it's like, and like to be fair, like I can ask that myself. Like I went on a bike ride today. Like I didn't have a good day. And like
Mm.
I'm happy that I came back in one piece, because like I was not guaranteeing myself coming back like that. If I would say that, that's a lie. Like usually I kind of do that, right? Like where I take responsibility. This time I didn't take responsibility. Like I think, like again back to the NPC. Like I think a lot of people just live that way. Like
Yeah. As NPCs, they're not really questioning quite what they're doing.
right, and like if you're living in God's will, like that's not a problem. But if you're living in a different will, then you're NPCing, and we get into really scary places.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's end here. Like maybe we want to roll it over Agape again, because I think like Agape is the author of the spirit or something, right? Or the author of a spirit and the Holy
Mm.
Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yeah, so do we know Agape? We know Agape by being in it,
Yeah.
but we don't get to know it. Right? Like
Yes.
this is one of these things, like you said, with meditation, right? Like that's bigger than you, and like I do think you can get tapped into it, but yeah, you know it by its fruits, right?
By church.
Yeah, that should help. Though I bet that there's churches that do the opposite.
Theoretically.
Well, yeah,
The meditation thing again. If you're
it's
going to church
probably
right,
more reliable, probably more reliable than
probably
doing,
more reliable.
right?
Lesser of two evils. Lesser of two evils at this
Yeah.
point.
But yeah, like there's a lot of work to be done in ourselves and
Yeah,
then
we
in
have a lot of work to
society.
do, indeed. Yeah. A lot of self-correction to do.
Yeah, comment, like, subscribe. Want to have a final word?
Final words. So, inner perfectionist now is sticking.
You got stuck in the roots.
It's stuck in the roots. It's gonna be spontaneous.
The root sandstorm. No, we got all of it. We
the
got the earth flying in the air and the spirit.
the problem is I have a very stormy mind, my friend. The roots are nowhere. They're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So I got out of this recognizing that I was stuck in a bit of a fluffy, flowery, everything's gonna be fine mentality. And I'm recognizing more and more now the value of agape right now, not just towards myself, but also towards the way things are. And then really coming to peace with this calling that I have in me, that you need to see what it is with God. What is God like? What does God want from you? I think this is the most important takeaway from me, is that the work I'm doing in the roots is not going to be enough if I'm not heeding the calling, because it is exactly paying attention to my responsibilities that is going to organize everything in one place. Otherwise, I'm just going to be caught up in the roots. So this is, I think, the most important takeaway I took from this right now. And it's kind of, I think, my starting point. Another important thing was that I like that we're kind of sort of on the same page in the way I see how agape is a feature of reality. I really was happy to hear that. Happy to hear that my thinking is at least going in some good orientation. But I want to work on that a little bit more. And I really appreciate your agapic, how the channel lives up to its name by giving its speakers space to sort of unfold their thinking as it is, and then it sort of crashes under its own weight when it's not in the right orientation. That's pretty much what Socrates does.
Yeah, like that's exactly. People are like, you're doing these things. I'm like, no, like that's just reality hitting you.
That's just how it is. That's just how it works, right? That's just how things are.
Because like if I would be doing these things, like I'm not smart enough. like, I can't carry that burden. Like
yeah.
Like sometimes people try to figure me out, right? And I'm like
there's nothing
there's nothing to figure out because I don't have anything to hold on to, right?
Yeah.
Like I'll just dance and I'll jump to whatever place I need to be because I don't have a bone in this game. Like you can't pin me down on a motivation, right? And like people get upset, like people don't understand me because it's like, well, in order to understand him, you need to know where he's coming from. And I'm like, yeah, heaven. Like, if you want to understand me, you need to understand heaven.
You need to understand the principles, the context from which I'm coming in order to understand me, because there's nothing there to understand. I've completely forsaken that for the sake of something more meaningful.
Right. And yeah, people can't deal with that. Right?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to reach that, and I admire that you've been able to reach that. It's a pretty powerful thing.
Was and is hard work.
Yeah, it is. I can imagine it's very hard work.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.